Are popping in for our third and final live stream Q&A for this month, and this is in promotion of my online course, 4 Steps to Passionate Partnership. And this is a course to help you access your attractive magnetic energy so that you can attract that soul-shaking passionate partnership that you want, even if you think you're too anxiously needy, and even if you think that you're just not good enough, right? So we have, over the past couple of days, been addressing some of the questions that usually pop up in my community around relationships, and in particular relationships that emerge when you have insecure attachment styles, and that is avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, disorganized attachment. In the process of that conversation, I've been explaining a little bit more of how and why I'm recommending this course. This course is really, I would say, an appetizer. It's a little sampling of my method, which is called the McWilliam method, and it is comprised of 3 core principles. Okay, they're saying there's no sound. Oh. Okay, Instagram says they can see and hear me okay. Okay, it looks like, okay, if you can't hear me, then it may be that you may have to refresh the page on your screen. But my method has to do with cognitive reframing, body activation, and arts-based experientials. And that is because oftentimes we can gain a tremendous amount of insight, but we wind up spinning around in circles with overanalysis, falling into double troubles, being anxious about being anxious, and we're not able to actually shift what's going on in the body, in the energetic body. And your emotions and your feeling states are evidence of what's going on in your energetic body. Okay. And this is, in essence, the source of your whole qualitative experience of life, basically. So we had a couple of questions come up. Yesterday we talked a little bit about jealousy. In particular, we also touched upon, values and priorities, how to know when to leave. And I mentioned that today we were going to answer a few questions that we didn't get to. So one of the questions that I would like to start with here today, because I think it's going to help you to understand how and why I am recommending this course, and it's available today at the lowest price I've ever offered it. It's $47. Usually it's $167. So if you are interested, there should be a link to that in the caption of this video, or if not, once the video ends, I will make sure it's there. So we did get a question about the course itself. So what about the fact that a person with attachment issues is looking for a missing attachment, right? So in our partnerships, we're trying to find mommy or daddy, relive in order to revise old wounding. There's a lot of work to grieve and accept the loss of the thing that you wanted but never got, and then you need to reparent yourself. 1,000 times yes. Yes, 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 yes. So this is a course that is an introduction to a process that I think you can engage with in order to affect that change. One course is not going to accomplish all of that for you, but one course can give you the tools and the direction and point you in the direction that you need to go in. And that's what this course does. If you want to dive into the other stuff, then you're actually looking to participate in one of my beginner or intermediate to advanced level courses. And if you're looking specifically for a developmental perspective, and if you want to examine the intersections between romantic attachments and complicated grief specifically, then the course you actually want to take is called Healing Attachment Wounds. And you can find that on my website, briannamcwilliam.com. That is the most comprehensive course where we really get into talking about like the neuroscience of attachment, developmental perspectives on attachment, experiential activities and guided visualizations for working with the inner child, establishing safety, things like that. But for some people, they're really not at that place yet. And 4 Steps to Passionate Partnership is an introduction to this kind of work. So I hope that clarifies that bit. But I want to actually expand on this a little bit because I think it's an important concept to kind of drive home just in general and for my audience. So we have this idea that healing our attachment experiences, in a way, we have to accept responsibility and accountability on some level for reparenting ourselves. But what is reparenting really? And so, what types of parents create insecurity within one's own sense of self and identity, and what exemplifies a secure parent, which we refer to as an autonomous or an authoritative parent in the literature. If you're interested in learning more about that, on my Instagram channel, I have a highlight called Parenting, where I go over, I think it's 8 parenting styles, 7 of which are insecure parenting styles, 1 of which is secure parenting, right? And that will basically outline that whole idea conceptually for you. But if you're like, how do I reparent myself when I've had no models for what good parenting is, then I highly recommend you check out the highlight on my Instagram feed, okay? Because we talk about autonomous parenting. Autonomous parenting is how you reparent yourself so that you feel more secure. Now, the traditional models, right, our traditional models of psychotherapy and treatment have a tendency to sort of espouse that therapy is kind of a treasure hunt into the past. And once we have some insight into how the past has affected us in the present moment, then that insight is going to release the energy around it. But then we feel baffled when all that knowledge and awareness doesn't actually affect any changes on the body level or on the energetic level, which is how you qualitatively experience your life day to day, how you feel emotionally, who you are attracted to, who is attracted to you, right? So working from a developmental perspective is highly effective. And I was actually a professor of human development for 6 years. And it is highly effective, and it can afford you a tremendous amount of awareness and insight. And when you can bridge that, when you can bridge insight into your past experiences into the present moment by contextualizing whatever the defense coping mechanisms are in the context of your energetic body, your current energetic body, and you can create a metaphorical or symbolic construct for that, because that's when you start to have real changes, because that is how the body organizes nonverbal information. So in other words, this is why the concept of healing the inner child is so popular, because it's so useful. It is a creative concept that utilizes symbol and metaphor to organize a lot of ideas within us for understanding what it means to have what we call a developmental arrestment. In other words, to have energy that got stuck and kind of rigid and split off at a certain time of life. Okay, we call that an inner child. And so, for example, internal family systems theory builds upon this and is very similar, but it adds to it this notion that we have many self parts in addition to an inner child. So you could have, for example, a manager or a defender or a guard or something like that, and a self part, an aspect of yourself that protects the inner child from you. Because when you try to access that part of yourself because you have long been unkind or neglectant of that inner child, you have to gain that inner child's trust. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust yourself on the most fundamental level. And you have to earn that trust. And you earn that trust like anybody else would have to earn your trust, through consistent action and behavior, cohesiveness between what you say and what you do, honoring your needs no matter what, believing that you have the right to have your needs and feelings no matter what, right? Being aware of and bolstering your own boundaries, not letting anybody walk all over you. Okay. And so in my course, specifically the 4 Steps to a Passionate Partnership, this is where I'm teaching you, I'm giving you a little taste, an appetizer, a tool, a way, a method, a process for how to help you access, yes, the inner child if that's what comes up, but it could be other aspects that are acting on its behalf. Okay, and we work with the energy that those parts inhabit and generate by accessing and contextualizing it in the present moment, in your current energetic body, so you can acknowledge it, yes, but also so you can let it move through you viscerally and energetically. And that's when we start learning how to ride the waves. That's how we learn how to start being flexible and easeful with the contrasts of life, which are never ending. You're never going to figure it out, and you're never going to get it done. You're never going to be this perfect vision of the most secure person that you have in your head. So what can you do? you can learn to ride the waves. You can learn to relax into yourself. You can learn to unfold into the deepest and brightest luminescence that is you. And to understand that every fly in your ointment is a point of contrast that is allowing you to expand to the farthest reaches of your own circumference. Okay? So that is how and why I feel my course applies to a developmental perspective. And I hope that makes that clear. We had another question. So I'm someone who, I'm an open heart. I've noticed a lot of my resistance to accepting myself the way that I experience love. And the way that I experience love is often stifled by my partner. He reinforces the idea that I have to be perfect and not insecure and needy. This exacerbates the feeling that I don't deserve a relationship. Okay. My personal development seems to stop when it butts up against his door. He's not willing to open up and practice different techniques with me. At what point does it end with me and start with him? At what point do I decide whether or not it's time to walk away, that I can continue to become more accepting of my journey? So it's interesting because as this question unfolds, it's like it's going in deeper, right? The top of the question is focusing on him and what he's doing and how what I'm doing is not making him change and what I'm doing is not earning his buy-in and what I'm doing isn't, so it's very much an external orientation. I'm doing all this work and yet I'm not getting validated, I'm not getting approval, I'm not getting buy-in, I'm not getting cooperation from the outside world. How can I make them do it? And if they are not doing it the way that all the books and videos and YouTube videos tell me it should be happening, then what am I doing wrong, right? So we're still looking to the external world to validate something for us. We're still looking to the external world to tell us that we're getting the A grade. We're still looking to the external world to tell us when we need to stay or when it's time to go. And then the question gets deeper. At what point does it end with me and start with him? All right, so now we're starting to access more of that inner voice. At what point do I decide whether or not it's time to walk away so that I can continue to become more accepting of my journey? So by the time we get to this part of the question, I immediately have an image of the adult version of this person and the childlike version of this person. And the adult version says, well, this person in the outside world says that we're too needy, so you need to suppress it. And then by the time we get to the end of the question, we have the inner child saying, at what point do you listen to me instead of him? At what point do you acknowledge that I am the divine source and spark of your existence? I am who you are, and I need no justification to be who I am and what I want and what I need. The stone does not justify its stillness. The wave does not justify its curve, right? Why do I have to justify this? Why do I have to make myself small? And so by the end of the question, we have the inner child poking out saying, when are you going to finally man up and honor me? So this is the dialogue that's going on inside of you. And so what happens is the energy that you have tied up in that dialogue gets projected out through, I'm a law of attraction person, through universal law. And now you attract into, now your inner world is mirrored in your outer world. And you attract a man who steps in and assumes the role of the adult character. And now you oscillate back and forth between being your own inner child, now acting out this dialogue with him in the external world, and becoming the adult. He says, no, you're too needy. You say, you're right, I'm too needy. We're too needy, right? It's this train that starts happening, right? So at what point do I decide whether or not, what point? At what point? When is enough, really? So this is a really good question, because I'm not saying that you need to throw everybody out just because you butt up some conflict or contrast between you, because that in essence is invalidating everyone's reality, right? So there is a process, a kind of diagnostic process that can occur, and it's like, okay, there's a certain kind of self-evaluation you can do and then bring into the relational space, and then you have a lot of really good information. So for example, I think that one of the ways you can kind of diagnose this process is you look at the communication, right? You look at how well am I identifying my own feelings? Am I correctly identifying my own feelings? Am I articulating them in such a way that I am being emotionally honest? Or am I actually articulating all of the defensive goop that I have layered over my feelings because historically they've been dismissed and considered a burden or too much or too intense or not important, right? So oftentimes when we are a fish swimming in water, we don't realize that we are articulating ourselves from a place of criticism or judgment. And that is always a defensive response. When you have someone who is very critical, criticism is usually an expression of grasping for control. And when you are grasping for control, it is because you are scared. And when you are scared, it is because you feel disconnected. You feel like you don't have sure footing. You feel uncertain of the people around you and of yourself. You distrust your own capacities. And at the root of that is a desire for connection, for love, for feeling filled up. And when you do feel that way, you don't grasp for control because you're not worried about it. You're just not worried about it. It'll unfold. It'll unfold in due time. And whatever unfolds will be really good information for me. And that's going to allow me to know how compatible we are or not. Doesn't mean I have to hate this person. Doesn't make them a villain if they can't meet my needs. But through the experiences of butting up against each other, we experience conflicts and contrast. We gain more awareness and insight into the dark corners of ourselves. And then we become more aware of what we want and what we don't want. And you give it a little bit of time. You practice your communication. You try to be more emotionally honest. And if you've been doing that well enough and you know that you have been in process with this and you look out into your partnership and you see that your partner, while they may have access to something, has not been engaging with it and as a result is not motivated to show up to the relationship with the same level of curiosity and investment that you have, that's a journey they have to take on their own. You cannot change someone else. You cannot change someone else. Not unless they are motivated to show up into the space in the same way that you are. And that is why relationships, they're really not about a commitment to the other person necessarily. They are a commitment to yourself. When you agree to be in a relationship with someone, you know it's a healthy relationship when that person prioritizes your needs and wants and desires as much as their own. Not more and not less. And that's very important. Not more and not less. If they prioritize your needs less, then we have an imbalance, and it usually leads to toxic dysfunction. If you prioritize them more, same thing. It leads to an imbalance and we have a toxic dysfunction. But if you prioritize their needs as much as your own, now we're on an even playing field. And now we can determine if our values and priorities are in fact a good match or not. And if they're not, it doesn't make them a villain. It doesn't make you lacking in worthiness or not good enough. It just means that your curriculum here on this earth has come to a close. Your curriculum here on this earth is meant to diverge in other directions. That means the nature of your relationship can change. It doesn't mean you have to break up with them necessarily. Some people find alternative ways of constructing their lives together. Or maybe you end the romantic relationship, but you establish a more platonic one, right? When you have an understanding of the gray areas when it comes to emotional, physical, mental boundaries, the possibilities are endless for how you love, how you receive love, how you express love, and how you connect to so many different types of people and so many different types of relationship configurations. Life becomes a buffet. But oftentimes when we have confused our emotional, physical, mental, emotional boundaries because we haven't had the models for how to organize those things very well through things like symbol formation and metaphor, then we split things into black and white. If you loved me, then you wouldn't do that. If you loved me, then you'd give all that up, even if it means you have to fundamentally change who you are, right? And why do we think that? Well, we cling to that because we think the world is a limited place full of scarcity and lack, right? There's nothing out there for me, and I have to cling to this possibility because if I don't, then it's the only possibility I have for happiness. Okay, so all of this is kind of going on beneath the surface. And when we are working with this earnestly, because, oftentimes when we come together, there is a kernel of love there. Because when these projections occur, when the inner dialogue is sent out, that frequency, that vibration rings out, and it entrains to someone else's vibration or frequency who has a similar vibration or frequency, there's a recognition. There's a recognition, and that's when you have that sense of like kismet, right? That's that sense of, this is my soulmate. Oh my God, I felt so enlivened. I have tingles all over my body when I met them. It's just this tremendous sense of excitement, and I knew it was predestined. Maybe in the sense that you have found someone that has a similar, soul tribe, soul mission, soul lesson, and it's likely because you have a similar wound that is in activation. So it doesn't mean that it's doomed to fail. It just means that here's a ripe opportunity to work with it. And you've got someone that has a deep understanding and familiarity with that wound. The trouble comes in when we have chosen opposite ways of coping with the same wound. Okay. And I'm releasing a video on my YouTube channel next week having to do with why they come back. Okay, and I get a lot more in depth with this, and I talk about the core limiting beliefs and how these are expressed like opposites, but they're actually the same, and how to release that. But to come back to this question, when you are in a relationship and you've been trying hard because you have a real positive attitude about relationships, you convince they're worth it, you see the potential, you see the divine spark in your partner, and you've become aware of all of the muck and gunk that has been coded over yourself and your own light and your own inner child, and you're like, you know what, I really want to try this expansion thing, this self-help thing, because I have an inkling, your soul has an inkling and a desire, and it's been raised into your awareness that there's got to be something bigger, better, and beyond this. And you've been working on it, and being the loving, lighted, connected, and generous person that you are, you would love it if your partner could join you on that journey, because there's something really special and delicious about sharing that kind of growth with someone, especially someone with whom you've had beautiful experiences, right? Transcendent experiences. And it is a loss. It's a grief. It's a experience worthy of your grief and a feeling of loss when that person is not able to meet you there. And so the challenge then is their disconnection from themselves. Now you are confronted with their disconnection from themselves. And sometimes if we struggle with boundaries, or we have some of these limiting beliefs in operation beneath the surface, we take in their disconnection from themselves, and then we feel a disconnection from them, as well as a disconnection within ourselves as well. We take it in as if by osmosis. It's like this energetic thing that happens. And so we start thinking, oh, but all of my self-advocacy hasn't been working. All of the hard work I've been doing hasn't worked. They're still stuck. And that's what I call the validation trap. This is the validation trap. You're still looking to them to validate your progress. You're still looking to them to validate your growth. And you're worried, if I outgrow them, now all the attachment fears emerge, right? All the attachment fears emerge. If I outgrow them, what will happen? What will happen? Will love still be there for me? And then you don't want to leave them behind because you feel like they are a part of you. And in many ways they are. They carried the same wound that you did. They carried the same wound that you did. But it's kind of like, it goes back to what I said before. We talk about, if you're familiar with New Age and New Thought circles, there's this concept of cutting energetic cords with partners. When you cut a cord with someone, these cords never go away. We are all connected. We are all one. But when you cut a cord with someone, you are setting the intention to restructure that cord. You are setting the intention to place that experience in your life on the shelf where it belongs in your library, right? And you can come back to it and open it and read it anytime you want. But for now, it may be time to close the book because you've read it 100 times over, and it's time for you to gain some new knowledge. Okay. And with the new knowledge, suddenly what you read in that book, weeks, months, years ago is going to make more sense. But you got to put it away for now. Okay. And those cords grow back. They grow back, but they grow back in different ways. This happens a lot. I have a lot of clients who will say, I was talking about and or thinking about an ex, and all of a sudden they called me. Yeah, of course. Because we are all connected, and they're going to sense it when you pull that string, right? There's not any real deep or profound meaning beyond it, aside from the fact to show you that you have that kind of power, especially on the energetic level. So my course is intended to help you acknowledge that and start to harness some of that so that you can move through the world a bit more intentionally, which means you know when to surrender when it serves you in order to give you more control of what you can surrender. So surrendering what you can't control, the paradox is, gives you more control over the things that you can, right? So how do I know? How do I know when it's time to leave? You have to ask yourself that. How do I know? You know, I have a video on my YouTube channel to help you think about this, and I usually ask you to ask your body, because your body's the first organizer of spirit, of experience. It's the house of your spirit, of your essence, of your soul, if you will, whatever language you like to use, your energetic body. And I like to use the chakra as a framework for chakra system as a framework for organizing energy, but chakras also correlate to spindles of nerves in your spine. And a lot of research tells us lately that we actually have intelligence in our brain, but also in our heart, in our gut, and along the spine. So I usually have you go through an assessment of 7 questions, which access these 7 energetic centers of the body to determine if this relationship is a good fit for you. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I invite you to check out the video on my YouTube channel. It's called When to Leave a Toxic Relationship According to Your Chakras. So I invite you to check that one out. So I'm just going to take a pause there because I've been talking a lot. And I just want to take a peek at the chat box to make sure that any of this is resonating with you. Yeah. As a psychic, what I tell my clients about negative chords is that they can only form in the holes in your aura. You have to heal the part of your aura rather than simply remove the chord. Yes, I like that, because it's always a two-sided thing, right? We got some amens. We got some yeses. Thank you. Yeah, so we also become very aware of our chords, right? We become aware of our chords. We become aware of our fear. And sometimes realizing how fearful we were at some point can be a little bit enlightening. It can also be a bit discouraging, like, oh, I had no idea I was operating that way. For example, I decided 2 years ago that I had kept a box. I called it my love box. And it had love letters and ticket stubs and receipts and photographs and all kinds of, I guess, paraphernalia from a lifetime of love and relationships, most of which, not all of them, but most of which were very topsy-turvy. And I also found some, like, I don't know if anybody here remembers ICQ. I'm dating myself here. Anyone remember ICQ chat? If you remember it, just give me a little thumbs up in the chat there. I had an ICQ chat transcript from back in the day, and my words, my language, my dialogue, the way that I was talking to this ex was outrageous. And from my perspective now, I was like, oh my God, I was so transparent. I was clearly trying to make him jealous. I was clearly hitting below the belt in everything that I said. I was so transparent and blatantly trying to emotionally manipulate and like tear this guy down because I was so mad at him. And I went back and I read all of this and I was like, oh my God, I was so disorganized. I was so like messed up and crazy and unkind. And then at the same time, this was someone that I gave so much to, gave so much to myself. And there was so much resentment built up on the backside of it. And I read these things and like, all the tears just started flowing. The tears just started flowing. I was beating myself up. Oh, why didn't I know better? How did I not know that I was so transparent? How did I not see myself acting this way? Why did I let myself go there? And then I realized that all of that I had to go through. All of these pendulum swings I had to go through. The extremes to start to understand and navigate that middle ground. And if I didn't have those experiences as viscerally as I did, I wouldn't be able to be on this call and talk about them as adequately as I do. You know, and I love talking about this stuff. As painful as it is to experience it, I actually love talking about this stuff. And it's funny because I'm in a relationship now, which is very secure and stable. And it's the first consistent, labels have been exchanged, exclusive, committed relationship I've had in like 5 years. I've had flirtations and flings and things like that, but this is the first stable, ongoing, consistent relationship that I've had and that I've been open to having in a long time. And it's funny as we butt up against these experiences, not all perfect, as we butt up against these experiences of contrast and conflict, I am seeing now and witnessing myself responding differently. I still feel the triggers. I still feel the triggers. I still feel my attachment system light up. I still feel the pounding in my heart and the immediate alarm bell that says, get out, get out, get out, leave now, walk out the door. My go tos tend to, I'm anxious internally, but I tend to act avoidantly. But I find myself taking a breath and I just say, you know what? This is just a sign my attachment system is threatened. And that means that everything that I am assuming in this moment is in question. And so I take a pause and I ask questions and I try to assume an attitude of curiosity. And every single time I've done that, and I've done it every single time thus far, it has led to a repair. It has led to a deepening of the intimacy. It has led to the circumstantial elements of my relationship becoming increasingly sure and secure. And my love has deepened. My love has deepened. It gets deeper over time. It does not fade. It doesn't become less exciting. It doesn't become less arousing. It's this like, oh, it's just like, think about my man. I just, slide out of my seat. So it's just like this amazing thing, and it's so secure and it feels so good. And I am just so happy to be inhabiting that, because as much as I love talking about this stuff, sometimes when it comes to yourself, it's hard. And, on occasion, he has said to me, do you like psychoanalyze me? Like, for all the things that you talk about, are you psychoanalyzing me? You are, aren't you? And I tell him, no, I let all of that go. I make a conscious choice, aside from applying it to myself and the way I'm showing up in the relationship, I let it go. Because it's kind of like when you first come to something like attachment styles or learning about self wounds and insecurity and all of that, drawing these lines around things like attachment styles, like giving it a label or giving it a category, right? It's helpful. It's kind of like when you go to when you arrive at this, it's like all the puzzle pieces are kind of jumbled up and you come to realize that there is a puzzle. And so what do we do when we build a puzzle? Well, usually you find the pieces with the edges and you put them together to build the frame. And now you can start to understand how to put the pieces in the middle so that it's fleshed out, right? So when you first come to something like attachment styles, or learning about the energetic body, or learning about how to shift your feeling states and not just have a ton of insight, we look for the pieces that have the edges. We look for categories. We look for diagnoses. We use things like attachment styles to draw lines around things, to find the edges of them, to define boundaries, right? Assessment lists, red flags, things like that. And as we start to play with these pieces and we move them into position, over time, you start to understand how the middle of that picture fleshes out. And suddenly you don't need the edge pieces so much anymore. It's kind of like, so my boyfriend is a chef. And I was explaining this to him and I said, it's sort of like, when you started cooking, you probably were, you followed that recipe to the letter, right? You were hyper vigilant about the measurements. You wanted to make sure you had all the best ingredients, so on and so forth. But once he became a professional cook, he's a professional cook, but once you became a professional cook, it's likely you didn't have to use that recipe 75% of the time, right? If not 80% of the time. I bet you hardly ever pull out a recipe anymore. You just know how it should go. And you arrive at that place. Eventually you arrive at that place, right? And it's a much more fluid thing. It's not so static. Okay. This kind of goes back to the question that we were talking about yesterday. There was a question about romance. How do you keep the romance alive? I think this is what I'm trying to answer right now, is you let it be a little bit more fluid. You feel the trigger and you're like, whoop, is this a red flag? You know what? I'm going to relax into it a little bit. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to let it fly. I'm going to give it some time and I'm going to see how it unfolds. I'm going to see how it unfolds because I trust that no matter what, I will be okay. And I trust that My needs and my wants and my emotions are valid, and I honor them no matter what. And so whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. So I'm just going to watch how this unfolds and take it as information. And when I come up against a threshold or a contrast, at which point I feel, not forced into, but I feel the motivation to make a discerning decision, I will. I will. Even if it involves feelings of loss, even if it involves feelings of disappointment or frustration. It's okay, because I'm not afraid of feelings like frustration or disappointment. That's not scary to me. That's just part of life. And I have the tools that I need to allow those feelings to move through me and not define what I bring into the next possibility, right? Or to the next relationship, even. So I wanted to just share that, and bringing it all back to where we started, this is the kind of approach that my course, 4 Steps to Passionate Partnership, is intended to give you an introduction to, right? Okay. So, okay. My new husband told me that I was a puzzle he was building in our relationship. We got married in June in part because I learned about attachment styles from you. Oh, I love that. That's so nice to hear. Congratulations. You keep it alive by understanding that it's normal, and that it's normal for it not to be there every single day. Yes. And that's a great point to make. And I would also add, keeping romance alive, it's not necessarily going to be there every day. Absolutely. And also understanding that the aliveness comes primarily from within you, right? That I believe love and romance is really more of a choice. It's not something that just happens to us. Maybe that's what attracts us in the beginning, that there's an unexpected, flood of emotions and chemicals and dopamine, and we meet someone who in some ways is a good match to us. And I believe there is some divine element and aspect to that, because I believe it is your spirit that attracts these people, because your spirit says, okay, you're ready for the next contrasting lesson. Let's bring it in. Let's call it in. Let's attract it into our experience. And so at first it's easeful because we find this partner, this person who can function as a point of focus, a conduit, a bridge to accessing those feelings and the parts of ourself that actually feels amazing, right? We want to feel that euphoric feeling, so we find someone in the environment to kind of pin it on. We don't pick just anybody, though. We don't pick just anybody. You can find hundreds, if not thousands, of people attractive, objectively speaking. And then let's say you meet them in person, and then you decide you're going to spend, go on a second date with them. That number, maybe goes down to like 20%, if that. And then you go on second dates with 20% of those people, and then the number shoots down to like 10, if not 5% of those people you would actually want to go on a third date with. And then what percentage of most of us, I shouldn't say most of us, but a lot of us inevitably whittle it down to one person. And that one person is the person that we're willing to give our time, energy, effort, and resources to, usually. All those other people you can have positive regard for. All those other people you could even love. But there's one person that you're willing to commit your time, energy, effort, and resources to, because we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So discerning who that person is, that's where your discernment comes in. That's where you put on your practical thinking cap, right? Is this a compatible match? Is this a compatible match? That's romantic to me. That's pretty darn romantic, right? And I think the hopeful message in that is it could be anyone. I really believe that. And once we make that decision, I think it is a romantic one, then we choose knowing that, okay, continuing to perpetuate the romantic feeling, to choose this person, even when we have arguments, even when things don't go well in life, continuously choosing to show up for them and to hold them in positive regard and to give them the benefit of the doubt and to be there to hold their hair back when they throw up, or to comfort them when a parent dies, or to cook dinner when they have to work late, right? Wow. What romance there is in that, right? What romance there is in that. And it's a choice. I think it's a choice, and it's a deeply powerful one. So with that, I will leave you. If you are interested in learning more about the course that we're promoting here today, I'll leave a link to that in the caption of this video. It's available at this price until the 28th. And when you join, you will have access to a paid private Facebook group where I go live like this at least once a month, usually a little bit more than that. And you can ask questions, you can tag me directly, and I answer them in the feed or on a live stream. So if you're interested, I invite you to check that out in the link in the caption of this video. And next month on my YouTube channel, we're going to be doing a new series on anxious avoidant relationships specifically. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I have adopted a little bit of a new style in recording videos. I'm turning my sights towards YouTube this year, and we're going to be playing around with storytelling and playing around with different editing techniques and stuff like that. So I invite you to check it out, leave a comment, let me know how you feel about it, and we can pop in for some other live streams moving forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.